I felt the chill of the evening breeze brush against my silk blouse as I stood on the small patio outside my father's grand estate. The laughter and clinking glasses floated up from the dining room, a reminder that I was, once again, seated apart. "It's nothing personal," someone had whispered earlier, but the sting of exclusion was sharp, familiar. I sipped my sparkling water, pretending the cool bubbles eased the ache in my chest, but my mind raced. Dad's 60th birthday, supposed to be a celebration of family, but here I was, sidelined, a spectator to a scene that should have included me. I adjusted my cuff, the gold bracelet catching the soft glow of the string lights, and for a brief second, I let the irony wash over me. This same family had taught me lessons in subtle rejection I now wore like armor. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A message preview flashed. Board confirmed. Flight departing in 20. Deal secured. $1.2 billion. I pressed my lips together, feeling a pulse of triumph I couldn't yet share. The distant rumble of an approaching jet reminded me that while they saw only the outsider, I had already claimed my universe. I exhaled slowly, letting the night air fill my lungs. I was calm, poised, smiling politely at the family voices drifting out to me, but inside, a storm of pride and vindication was ready to land, just like my private jet would, in less than half an hour. I remember that night as if it were yesterday, though I was barely 23. The same estate, the same grand dining room, but everything felt larger, colder, and somehow impossible. I had just returned from my first real business trip, my suitcase heavy with ambition and dreams, yet no one seemed to notice. "Emily, darling, sit outside tonight. The grown-ups will handle the rest," my father said casually, as if handing me a chair on the patio was a kindness. My hands trembled, a half-smile frozen on my lips. I wanted to argue, to demand recognition, but I felt the familiar lump in my throat, the one that appeared whenever my worth wasn't seen at home. The party carried on inside, laughter, clinking glasses, a symphony of family I was excluded from. I sank into the wrought iron chair outside, tracing the patterns in the marble floor with the tip of my heel. My grandmother's words echoed softly in my mind, the ones she whispered the night before she passed. "Never let them decide who you are, Emily. Your value is not in their applause. Find your own stage, and let the world see it." I clutched the small, worn leather notebook she had left me, a notebook full of quotes, sketches, and ideas she'd scribbled down during her life as a small business owner. It smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, grounding me, reminding me that the world outside these walls could be kinder and more honest than the one I had known. That night, I made a quiet, decisive vow. I would leave behind the suffocating expectations and invisible boundaries of my family. I would build my life, not for approval, but for myself. I closed the notebook, pressing it to my chest, letting the cool night air carry away the sting of rejection. For the first time, the patio didn't feel like a cage. It felt like the threshold of a door I was finally ready to open. I left that estate that night carrying nothing but my grandmother's notebook, a burning determination, and a head full of ideas. The city skyline stretched out before me as I stepped off the train, the lights twinkling like promises. I didn't have a roadmap, but I had vision, and that was enough to start. At first, it was grueling. I worked 12, sometimes 16-hour days, navigating a world that often dismissed young women with ambition. My mentor, Claire Donovan, a seasoned dealmaker in finance, saw what no one else did. "Emily," she said during one late-night call, "they're not wrong to doubt you. They're wrong to underestimate you. Use it." Her voice was firm, unwavering, yet comforting. That one phrase became my mantra. Use it. I faced rejection after rejection. My first client laughed me out of a pitch. Another told me my ideas were too idealistic for the market. My hands shook as I typed emails at 3 a.m., double-checking every number, every forecast, terrified I'd mess up. But with every small win, an investor saying yes, a profitable deal, the first time my account balance climbed into six figures, I felt a quiet surge of independence. I learned to master both numbers and narratives, crafting deals that dazzled and convinced. By the time I turned 27, I had a portfolio that, on paper, rivaled some of the firms my father's friends boasted about at family events. Yet no one at home knew. My social media remained modest. Casual brunches, a few selfies, never a hint of the empire I was quietly building. I bought my first office space downtown and adorned it with personal touches that reminded me of my journey. A photograph of my grandmother smiling, her notebook on my desk, a small golden sculpture I'd won from my first big client. These objects weren't for anyone else's admiration. They were markers of my growth, evidence that I had succeeded on my own terms. And then came the $1.2 billion deal, the one I had been negotiating for months, quietly, strategically, while the world assumed I was still the girl sitting outside, at family dinners. The moment the final signature hit the table, I leaned back in my chair, breathing deeply, letting the magnitude sink in. I hadn't just survived. I had thrived. I had rewritten the story my family had tried to confine me to, and I did it quietly, meticulously, with no one noticing until the right moment. That was the power of independence. No announcements, no need for validation, no family applause. Just the unshakable knowledge that I had built my own world, and when I chose to reveal it, it would be undeniable. The day finally came. My father's estate glittered under the late afternoon sun, the kind of golden glow that made everything look eternal, untouchable. I arrived in my sleek black car, sunglasses shielding the quiet triumph in my eyes. The family expected me to stroll in, timid, a shadow of the ambitious woman they'd dismissed for years. What they didn't expect was the storm that had quietly grown, one I now carried like a crown. As I entered the grand dining room, I let my gaze linger on the familiar faces, cousins whispering, aunts casting side-eye glances, my father sipping wine with the same controlled composure. I could see the old assumptions playing out in their eyes, that I was the outsider, the one who belonged on the periphery. But I didn't flinch. I simply smiled, letting them adjust to the sight of me. They didn't notice the office staff trailing subtly behind, or the documents in my briefcase that detailed my latest deal, one valued at $1.2 billion. They didn't know that I had, months ago, quietly acquired shares in several high-profile companies, that I was now a major decision-maker with influence that rivaled even my father's old connections. I led them to the garden terrace, the same one where, years ago, I had been seated outside. I let them take in the view, my private jet visible in the distance, a sleek, gleaming statement of triumph, and let the suspense build. The air was thick with curiosity, a tangible tension that made the slightest whisper sound loud. Finally, I spoke. I imagine some of you assumed I'd still be outside, waiting for scraps of acknowledgement. That's not the case anymore. I opened my briefcase, laying out the documents, projections, and press confirmations of my deal. This, I said, gesturing to the papers, is the result of years of work, of nights spent building something I was told I couldn't. This $1.2 billion deal? It's just the beginning. The room fell silent. My father's wine glass trembled in his hand, a rare crack in his composed demeanor. My sister's jaw tightened, eyes widening as she realized that the quiet girl they had dismissed had quietly become untouchable. Cousins, aunts, uncles, each absorbed the reality in their own way. Shock, disbelief, awe. No words came immediately. Only the weight of undeniable accomplishment filled the space. I let the silence linger, giving them time to let the reality sink in. For years, I watched from the outside, learning, building, preparing. Tonight, I'm inside, on my terms, in my own power, without anyone's permission. My voice was calm, firm, layered with every ounce of pride I had stored over the years. Eyes darted between me, the documents, the distant jet that glinted under the sun. This was my stage, my moment of vindication, and I reveled in it. Not cruelly, but with the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who had survived dismissal and emerged victorious. I was no longer a girl seated outside. I was the architect of my own empire, and the room finally understood it. The room still hummed with disbelief, their silence a mirror to the storm I had kept contained for years. I could feel the subtle shift. No longer was I the one on the margins. I held the power now, not just in wealth, but in the authority to shape how this family could move forward, if they chose to at all. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my presence settle. I'm not here to punish anyone, I began, my voice calm, yet carrying the precision of someone who had calculated every word. But things need to change if we're going to have any relationship moving forward. I turned first to my father, the man who had once brushed me aside like I was invisible. You've spent years measuring success by appearances and approval. That stops now. I'm giving you a chance, not to relive old habits, but to build something meaningful. I want you to focus on mentoring, not controlling. Your legacy isn't just wealth, it's guidance, influence, and the people whose lives you touch. Then I faced my sister, eyes steady and unyielding. Competition is natural, but cruelty is not. You will pursue your own ambitions without tearing others down. If you can do that, we can move forward. If not, your choices are yours alone, but you will see the consequences. To the cousins and extended family who had whispered and judged for years, I said, no more assumptions. No more undermining. You will respect boundaries, and you will support each other in honest ways. Those who refuse this standard of integrity will find themselves outside the circle, again, this time by choice. I wasn't cruel. I was firm. Every condition I laid out had purpose: emotional growth, accountability, self-reflection. I wanted them to learn what I had learned the hard way, that power, respect, and self-worth are earned through action, not entitlement. Finally, I let my gaze sweep across the room. This is not about money, though it is a tool, I said softly. It's about respect, dignity, and reclaiming the relationships that matter. You have an opportunity to be better versions of yourselves. I will help where I can, but I will not compromise my boundaries or my values.
Not now.
Not ever. The silence that followed was different from the earlier shock. It was contemplative. Faces softened in moments of realization. Shoulders, once rigid with expectation, relaxed just slightly. I knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. But I also knew that by setting clear conditions, I had shifted the balance. I was no longer just Emily, the outsider. I was Emily, the architect of change, in control of not just her empire, but the emotional dynamics she had once endured. I stepped back, letting them absorb it all. For the first time, I felt the freedom of authority married with empathy, the rare combination that true power brings. And as I looked out toward my private jet waiting silently on the runway, I understood. The world had changed, and so had I. Weeks passed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the family began to shift. My father scheduled mentoring sessions with young entrepreneurs, sharing knowledge he had hoarded in pride for years. My sister took on her own ambitious projects, learning to celebrate achievements without resentment. Cousins began collaborating rather than competing, conversations turning from whispers to genuine curiosity about each other's lives. I watched it all quietly from my office, the golden sunset casting long shadows across my desk. My grandmother's notebook lay open beside me, the pages now filled with my own scribbles. Reflections, lessons, strategies. Every quote, every piece of advice, had become a cornerstone of the woman I had grown into. I traced my fingers over the worn leather cover, inhaling the faint scent of lavender that always reminded me of her guidance. It wasn't perfect. Old habits still surfaced, occasional slips of ego or impatience, but the trajectory was undeniable. Growth had taken root where only tension once thrived. And I realized, as I often did now, that true empowerment wasn't about the silence of envy, it was about the quiet transformation of influence, of showing people that change was possible without compromise. That evening, I took a moment on the terrace, looking out at the private jet still waiting on the tarmac. It was more than just a symbol of wealth. It was a testament to persistence, to self-reliance, to the long nights and sacrifices no one had witnessed. I smiled softly, a gentle recognition of my journey. I had endured the sting of being unseen, of being undervalued, and I had emerged not bitter, but resolute, confident, and gracious in my strength. As the lights of the estate shimmered below, I whispered to myself, a mantra of triumph and clarity: I am not defined by where I was seated, but by the heights I choose to reach. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I felt an unshakable truth settle within me. The girl once seated outside had not just returned. She had arrived, fully, unapologetically, and on her own terms. She had rewritten the story, and nothing could take that power away.